So shall we talk about the trend first? Like, I think, this is something I talked about in my Sri Lanka video, that the China story is related to this trouble in emerging markets, but I don't think it's the full story. But there definitely seems to be like a turning point, right? So much stress. Like Sri Lanka is obviously now crashing, but Afghanistan probably has already crashed. But the world has lost a little bit of interest in that story, it seemed. Also, there's not a lot of data out, I guess. But there's much more like Lebanon, Tunisia, Ghana, I think, is in trouble, Zambia.
Bangladesh. Yeah, no, it's sort of a fascinating thing because there is a lot of stress in emerging markets, and it's not a single factor thing. Kind of like your video on Sri Lanka summed it up awfully well, because there were 4 to 5 different forces all applied at once to Sri Lanka that caused this collapse. And when you look at other emerging market countries, they're all coming under pressure, but often different pressures. Like you can't, like if you look at Ghana, the problems they have are quite different to Sri Lanka. They all are getting squeezed by certain big geopolitical things, like the strong dollar and inflation in the US isn't, it's almost a bit like a taper tantrum 2.0 kind of a feeling. But you've got, and you've got kind of food inflation possibly coming from the Ukraine situation. Just there are a lot of problems kind of squeezing in on many of the emerging markets right now. And yeah, it's a fascinating, it's funny, I made my video about China, but basically what's interesting to me is that China, I think it was 2013, sort of started with this Belt and Road Initiative, the idea being to, sort of build out trade infrastructure, kind of a new Silk Road around the world. And they made an awful lot of loans, and many of those loans are not looking so good because they're these are loans to countries that are looking quite shaky at the moment. And in many ways, depending on the country, there appears to have been a lot of malinvestment associated with that. For example, like cricket stadiums in Sri Lanka, and versions of that all over the world that weren't needed in an emerging market. But I find it interesting. I guess I put up the video about China and the issues around the Belt and Road Initiative, and I was a little bit surprised that I got a certain number of angry comments where people said to me, "Why are you criticizing China?" And I thought, well, I'm not criticizing China. I'm saying that they made a bunch of loans to people who at the moment are struggling to pay back those loans. But it's interesting that there's a certain segment that viewed that as an accusation of wrongdoing, to frankly either side of that transaction, But it would appear that there just is an awful lot of stress in emerging markets, and not driven by one simple factor. It's driven by an awful lot of what's happening in kind of global politics, global economics, just even fund flows. Like, I read the other day, about the huge outflows that have occurred from emerging markets. And it's just investors who will say put their money in an EM index fund and have decided they've had enough and are pulling out. But of course, that then impacts people in those countries. So.
Yeah, I had the same thing with my Sri Lanka video. So I tried to sort of summarize the 4 main narratives and give sort of pros and cons. But the overwhelming amount of comments, about being negative about one of these narratives was, what, China, only 10% of the debt, you are a Western propaganda machine. And it got me wondering that, even small channels like ours are comparatively small, are perhaps targeted by state actors who are commenting, which is quite flattering, right?
Because I have watched your video, and my takeaway from your video was that you said there were 4 main factors that caused problems. I think you kind of possibly weighted most heavily towards corruption in the country, but you did not say this is what happened. You said these are the factors. I'll allow you to tell me in the comment section what you think the issue is. So you by no means blamed any of the four factors. You simply put forth that there are events occurring that conspired to bring about this crisis. But yeah, I even wonder if the angriest comments, if they've even watched the video, because it doesn't fully make sense. Some of what they have to say, but
yeah, perhaps. Although I mean, in their defense, there is of course some power in choosing the narrative. So I did come also across narratives that I thought were ridiculous, and so I didn't present them. So I guess by presenting China as one of those narratives, I do signal that I think it's not complete bullshit. Oh, I was just thinking if I need to beep myself on this stream.
One of the things that's interesting, like the reason that China as a big lender to Sri Lanka, the reason it's interesting is that we have more of a history. There's about a 70-year history of kind of how the Paris Club deals with emerging market restructures, like basically when loans go wrong, which they do from time to time. There's a framework by which usually all of the countries that are owed money negotiate with the borrower to get paid. Like whatever concessions are made, they're made by all of the lenders together rather than on a one-by-one basis where different deals are negotiated. And the thing that's interesting about China as a lender to Sri Lanka, because as you say, it's 10% of the overall debt, but China doesn't tend to join in those group negotiations. They tend to negotiate their own deal, which is, of course, reasonable for them to do. But that then just leads to curiosity as to how that will work. And it means that other lenders to Sri Lanka kind of want to see how that goes. Because, for example, the IMF doesn't want to give money to Sri Lanka that will instantly just be handed over to China, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not going to negotiate a bailout that just hands money to another creditor nation. So that's kind of what's interesting about the current situation in Sri Lanka. And once again, there's no judgments in there. There's no claim that there's a high-end moral country versus an evil country. It's that there's different ways of doing things, and it's interesting to see how things will work out when these two opposing approaches kind of collide within a restructuring in Sri Lanka.